Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Guided Podcast. Catherine Ann, our resident intuitive astrologer, is here to discuss the solar eclipse in Aries that's going to be occurring on March 29th. So, Catherine, what do we have in store for us this time around?
Okay, so eclipse season, as one of our favorite astrologers says, the eclipses are here, the eclipses are here. And so last episode, we talked about the lunar eclipse in Virgo that had that entry into eclipse season, a little bit different vibe than what we're going to be dealing with now with this solar eclipse in Aries. So this is the last eclipse in Aries of the Aries eclipses that we have had over the last couple years. So last year, if you remember, there was a really big total solar eclipse in Aries that all the world was talking about. People traveled from everywhere to see it in its totality. This is a really big deal to have a total solar eclipse, especially middle of the day. The eclipse comes in, blocks out the light, and it's quite an experience. So, this is the last eclipse in that series of eclipses. And it's not a total eclipse because we have the node in Pisces already. So, there's some separation there, but it is still an eclipse. And it is like that punctuation point on those lessons that we were working on over the last couple of years when we had the nodes in Libra and Aries. So, just as a reminder, if you've been following our podcast, you know this ad nauseum. It was the me versus we on the Libra Aries axis. So this is that last eclipse on that axis. And what we're really looking at with Aries is the me, not the we. We're looking at the me. So this is about who am I? Self expression. I matter. And that is what Aries is all about, anyways, right? So the moon in Aries it's all about me. Aries energy in general is what do I need? What do I want? You can think about it as the very first sign in the zodiac. A lot of times you can think about this energy as almost like toddler energy because think about a 2-year old. They call it the terrible twos because all of a sudden this child has started saying no or me or I. And that's because they're in this mode of I matter and this is what I want and I'm going to stand up for what I want. That's the perfect analogy for this Aries energy. And so when we're looking at this eclipse in Aries and knowing that it's the final eclipse of this series, we know that we've been working on this concept for a while now. And last year, if you remember, with all the hoopla of the big total eclipse, there was also a lot of, as always with eclipses, big dramatic changes. And eclipses do bring change. For some people, they're more dramatic than others. We're going to talk about that in a little bit about how certain signs are going to feel this stronger than others. For some, it's more about witnessing it happening as opposed to something happening to them in their life, especially if they know people with these particular signs that are going to get hit a little bit harder. But for everybody, we've been journeying through this me versus we. And this feels like a punctuation mark on what have we learned and where do we go from here? Because it's actually not the end. And that is because of Chiron. So Chiron is I want to say a planetary body between Uranus and Saturn that is known as the wounded healer archetype. And Chiron has been very intimately involved with these eclipses. And also, Chiron moved into Aries in 2019. So, since 2019, all of us have been working on what about me and the wounds around self. Because as the wounded healer, Chiron working through this area of self is bringing up for different people, it's going to be kind of in different ways. We'll talk about that when we look at some of the signs, but is it my sense of belonging in my home, my sense of belonging in the workspace? Like, how do I fully show up? Where do I feel like I can't show up because I have wounds that stop me from self expression? And so we've been on this journey with Chiron since 2019 saying it's time to heal those spaces. And I feel most significantly that because these eclipses just keep interacting with Chiron over the past couple years, it's gotten louder and louder and louder. And I feel like in my world, in my orb, the word authenticity has gotten louder and louder. And I do feel like that's related to this I matter and this chironic wound that we're being asked globally to heal and to start showing up for ourselves. And that doesn't mean in a selfish way. It means I have value, but I need to heal all the things around it that stop me from really either seeing my value or sharing my value. And one of our teachers in the past have always said about the importance of putting yourself into the equation. This is what this Chiron and Aries has been working on all of us. How do we put ourselves into the equation that we matter, that we have value, that even though it's been scary or hard, or we've had childhood situations, experiences, teachings that told us otherwise. That idea of children are seen but not heard, or whatever type of experiences you had growing up that told you that your opinions or your voice didn't matter. That we're unraveling all of this since 2019. And these eclipses are putting big pushes in that healing space. I'm going to walk us through this Chiron journey just to give us like a timeline of how this has shown up. Because even though this is an eclipse, Spirit really wanted me to have this conversation about the journey of Chiron and Aries because we've had the eclipses, but also we've just spent since September with Mars in Cancer. And just in February 23rd, 24th, Mars finally went direct and started moving along and still in Cancer. And it is still going to be in Cancer for this eclipse. So we're still really working on this emotional safety and security. This is that Mars and Cancer journeys. Part of it was external. Then we went internal, really did some deep diving. Now it's external again. And it's asking us to take actions around emotional safety and security. Well, I think that is a beautiful pairing with this concept of healing the wounds of self. Because if you're feeling safe and secure, then you can step forward a little bit more. But you can't step forward if you don't feel safe.
Agreed. And creating emotional safety within ourselves is such a huge part of this spiritual awakening and the journey. And I just want to interject for people who don't understand what authenticity really is. We recently released a podcast episode called Dimming Your Light, Stop Dimming Your Light, The Power of Authenticity. So if you need a deeper dive into what authenticity is and what that means, please go check out that episode so that you can more fully grasp these astrological aspects as you move into your own sphere of mattering.
Awesome. And what I've mentioned before in other astrology podcasts, and I'll say again, is I feel like if you're following the transits, if you're watching how this develops, you can't help but see the beautiful orchestration of the universe in how we get the energy of one transit will open something up. And then the energy of another transit will say, now go in and reflect about it. And then the transit changes and it says, okay, now do something about it. And so it's this, oh, I just have full body chills. It's like this beautiful orchestration to help us peel the layers of the onion of our self healing. And so I think that's a little bit why Spirit really wants me to talk about this journey of Chiron and Aries because it's this multi-layer process that we've all been going through. It's not a one and done, and we are actually really far in the process now. Chiron will stay in Aries until 2026, 2027. I'll do some in and out at the end there with some retrogrades, but we're on the other side of this initial transit. And That's why I say this eclipse is a big punctuation mark of look at how much we've learned over the last 5 to 6 years, and we're almost there. We're almost like when you are going through all of this healing, especially for, if you're my age, I actually have Chiron and Aries. And when you're 49, 50, 51 is when you have your Chiron return. And what they say about your Chiron return is so that's when Chiron has traveled the entire zodiac and it comes back to the place it was when you were born. And it's a process of, depending on retrogrades and stuff, it's a process of a year or so where it might be going back and forth over this spot. But what they say about this Chiron return is the whole time prior is when you're doing the healing. And then afterwards is where you really step into the archetype of the wounded healer, where you get to share your knowledge of the journey that you've taken. It's like you become the wise one in this area. And so I really feel like as we're on the opposite end of this entry of Chiron into Aries, that's where we're at. We're at that place where we've learned a lot. If we haven't done maybe some substantial healing in this area. It's like the final push where, we're really going to have some good opportunities. And there's also that element. And then we get to teach others. We get to, in this area of healing of self, we get to share what we've learned with those that come to us ready for that healing, which is such a beautiful journey.
Yeah, so I feel like that the journey of the wounded healer was always to me like, healer, heal thyself, right? And then as we heal ourselves, we're more able to step fully into that role to help other people. So that's why it's so important to your point about you matter, directing that energy back to ourselves. Like it's our own healing is really important. And that's dedicating ourselves to that journey and letting ourselves know that we're worth our own healing because we're worth living our best lives, to me feels like it's everything. That's how we live most authentically. So I can't wait to dive into this more.
Yeah. So when we think about this healing journey, I'm just going to take us back. So enters Aries February 2019. And Chiron is saying, we need to come to terms with who we are. We need to start this journey of self acceptance. And every year since 2019, the sun has come in lined up, direct conjunction with Chiron. And with the sun, it's like bright light, right? So every single year since 2019, we've had this moment of maybe a button being pushed or it just showed me this is not a pretty picture, but they just showed me like digging out a wound, like we're going in, we're doing it. And so this had been this gradual development. Now that we entered this nodal Libra Aries axis, and then we started having eclipses with Chiron, it was okay, big changes, big shifts, really show up for yourself, which I think I just cannot express how loud this has gotten over the last year in particular, at least in my realm. And then we have in this, well, let me go back to so June 2024, we had Mars going through Aries. So Mars is the ruler of Aries, which is where we get that the god of Aries is whether it's called Aries or Mars, it's this god of action and war and energy and fire. So Mars has been ruling Chiron this whole time. So again, there's some action, some fire, some toddler tantrum energy in this Chiron journey to self, because sometimes when we have beliefs about ourselves that have been programmed in very young, we don't know how to express them in any other way than that young release of energy. So, maybe you're releasing that energy in the way that a 5-year-old would, because that's where that wound happened. Right. And so part of this healing journey, I think also is becoming friends with your inner child so that you can like expression of tantrum and instead hold hands with it and say, I see you. I recognize This wasn't fair. This hurt. This made you angry. Let's release it and have a new expression for it. Because tantruming as an adult doesn't go over quite as well as it does as a child, right? It can be a little bit more consequential. So in June of 2024, Mars went through Aries and it really ignited this fire around healing yourself. So we had that eclipse say, let's do it. Then we had Mars come in and say, let's do it, take some action. And then it was maybe I need to take a concrete step to the action. You were feeling it, but maybe this means that you signed up for a class about, how to heal your inner child, or you did some ancestral healing, or you finally decided to get a therapist. Something around, I need to figure out how to show up for myself and heal myself. For some people who, whether they were already on that healing journey or not, they may have taken actions like, I can't be in this environment anymore because it doesn't allow me to be me. And so last June, there was some action that was really pushing, whether you took small action or you just felt the action. And sometimes, depending on how comfortable you're feeling, you might have felt the need for action and resisted, and it could have been even harder. So then we come into, like I mentioned before, September of 2024, Mars enters Cancer. There was a month in Leo, but we're going to ignore that for a moment because all of this time, September until all the way until April 17th, Mars in Cancer is this whole journey around emotional safety. So a really, really deep dive into emotional safety, crucial in being able to express yourself, crucial in being able to not only have acceptance, but then bring that out into your world. So here we are with our eclipse. I'm finally getting there. Our eclipse that is happening on March 29th, the eclipse itself is not an aspect to Chiron. The eclipse itself is at 9 degrees Aries. Chiron is not close to that. It's at 21, 22 Aries. They're co-present. They're in the same house. It's still all this Aries energy, but they're not in any direct aspect. But what is Mars is square Chiron. So as square aspects bring tension, obstacles, and sometimes decisive action. Eclipses bring change, sometimes through surprising actions. It just depends on where this eclipse is falling and what your journey is and like your own level of inner work of whether or not these eclipse energies are shocking because they can be. There is also a Uranus element to this eclipse. I feel like it's been in every single moon podcast we've done, but it's a pleasant one. It's not, it's a supportive one. It's an aspect that says, I can face my problems, I can find solutions, and I can let go of old resentments. So the Uranus aspect with this eclipse is actually helpful, but it's still an eclipse. Unexpected things can happen. And when we're looking at this idea of Mars square Chiron, what we're being asked is, what actions do we need to take in order to feel safe in fully expressing who we are? And since it's this square where there's obstacles and tension, you might find that that means you have to draw a hard line, take a stance, hold a boundary. Might not feel comfortable because of that square aspect of tension, but it is a necessary step in owning who we are. And because now Mars is direct, we're taking action. This is not this inner contemplation anymore. This is we are doing something to step more fully into who we are. And so as much as I like to say, go with the universal flow and ride the wave, that doesn't mean that you don't take action. Because if you are getting that understanding that there's an action that needs to be taken for your full self expression and you don't take it, that's where this eclipse energy can say, so we're doing it anyways, kind of like it or not. Right. And so that's where you get the opportunity to say, it it's the theme is I matter, dramatic push towards self expression. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. I matter, a dramatic push towards self expression. So, are you taking that dramatic step? Are you taking the action? Or is the universe pushing you? Because either way, movement is happening. And when you choose the movement, even though it might be scary to speak up for yourself or to tell somebody you're not a healthy person in my life or whatever the situation may be, that always feels better than being pushed into something unwillingly. And then, just as a little aside, and we'll talk about this in our next podcast, but the sun will come into conjunction with Chiron at the next full moon. So just 2 weeks later. So it's just this continuation of this Chiron energy that we're all looking for a way to really dive into who are we and how do I advocate for myself? How do I advocate for my well being? And do I need to do that in a way that is very, I want to say 3D specific: job, home, relationships? Or is it still more of an internal journey just because of where this falls in your chart? But either way, it is a massive journey of healing that we've all been on. And this just feels like they're saying, like, this is a celebrate who you are. This is a celebration. Go for it. Step into it. That's what this eclipse is saying we have the ability to do. I do also want to note that during this March time, there's a lot of other things going. There's we have Mercury and Venus have gone through retrogrades. We have Neptune that's about to be stepping into Aries just the next day after this eclipse. That is humongous energy shift. So there's more going on in this planetary picture that I'm not talking about because spirit just really wanted us to focus on this. And I feel like the reason why they're saying just focus on this is something you touched on earlier, which is it all comes down to healing yourself. If you focus on healing yourself, everything else falls into place. And so, yes, there are big, 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 big shifts in 2025. But if we kind of hone in to that energy of, but I'm on this big journey of self expression and owning myself, one, it allows us to shut out some of the outside noise. And two, we find more productive movement on our healing journey because the focus has always been us all along.
I think one of the things that can be so challenging about making yourself matter is you are changing how you show up in relationship with yourself and in relationship with others. And to your earlier point, most change requires some sort of loss and sacrifice. But I remember exactly where I was during that Libra access. I remember exactly what I was healing. And what I have to say is, as I now feel more deeply than ever, I really matter and I take action supportive of making myself matter. I just want to share with people, as hard as it is to change, to feel the losses or sacrifices that you have to make in your own becoming, you will love who you become in the process. If I can just encourage anyone, I have full chills because that is my truth. And if you had told me on the front end of this, that is how I would feel, I would have told you you were crazy because it was very painful, right? Like that whole metamorphosis and how the cocoon phase, like you're dissolving all of your paradigms and beliefs into this goo in order to become that butterfly. And that goo phase does not feel good, but you will love who you become on the other side. So it is always worth the journey. Please, please, please know that.
Absolutely. So, interestingly enough, this eclipse really hits four particular zodiac signs. Not that all of us aren't going to experience it in some way, but there are four where the shifts are in maybe much more tangible areas of their life. and much more direct to them areas of their life. Whereas the other 8 signs, you could witness something happen to someone in your life and you go, oh, yeah, there's that eclipse energy. Or it's a subtler experience of it. You still are on this Chironic journey in Aries of self expression, healing self acceptance. So that all still is true for everybody. But there's 4 in particular that I want to say are like the heavy hitters. And so we're just going to focus on those 4. So the 4 signs are Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. And the reason why is because not only where the eclipse is happening, but also where Mars is squaring Chiron, that they're hitting a square in areas that are like the loudest areas. And so that's what we're going to be looking at. So again, what actions need to be taken in order to feel safe in fully expressing who you are? And you may have to hold a hard line. And that may be a boundary you have to hold for others or a boundary you have to hold for yourself in order to step into owning. This is who I am. This is how I now am going to show up in the world, even if it makes you uncomfortable. So we're going to start with Aries. And so, Aries, of course, this is all about you, right? Chiron's been in your sign since 2019, deep diving all about you. And I would say to a deeper level than everyone else because it's in your sign. And so, what we're looking at is like this ultimate need for I have to be me and the world has to see me, and you already have this energy. So it's a double down. And I really want to say our chart is vast and we have lots of other elements. And so for some Aries, they already exude this like, I am me and I matter. And this is like, take me or leave it because whatever else they have going on in their chart supports that. And so while they have been taking a deep dive on self, maybe their deep dive has to be with balancing authenticity versus selfishness. And yes, it's all about me. Yes, I matter. And, there's a balance there. There's like the shadow way to exude that or the light way to exude that. And so with Aries, where Mars has been going through this deep dive is in your 4th house of family, home, and roots. So this is where we're hitting this intersection. And so for Aries, you are going to be really looking at how being who you are converges with your family, your childhood, your roots. Were you allowed to show up in your fullness as a child? Was it safe for you to do that? And, or I want to say, or were you called a brat in your family home because you understood this energy of I matter and other people didn't? Right. And so now, as we've been going through this deep dive of emotional security in our home, in our childhood family, in our roots, you're at this place now where you're having to say, look, I'm drawing a line here. You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to use a derogatory nickname just because you've always called me that. Or maybe you felt like there were some patterns or programs in your childhood, in your family home, given to you by your parents that don't resonate with who you truly are. They're cultural biases, there's some sort of outdated tradition. And you're like, look, I love you. And in order for this to feel like an emotionally safe environment, when I spend time with my family, these are my lines that I can't cross anymore. Right. Like I totally respect and honor the way you raised me in this culture or this religion, but it doesn't resonate for me. So while I want to continue with you, let's agree to disagree. Let's not have this be a source of tension anymore. That's where Mars is being able to really take action in this area of family. And it even may be that if you're not having to do something directly with your childhood home or your family of origin, maybe you're looking into your ancestral lineage. And so you've been taking this deep dive. Maybe you've even done some ancestral healing and you're like, now I'm taking action moving forward after clearing that path, after some deep reflection. Or this is now the time you're going to take the step to do that. Because without a doubt, healing in that home space is an important energy for this eclipse, for the Aries and Aries rising. So the next sign we're going to look at is Cancer. So for Cancer, this journey of Chiron has been focused on your career and reputation. So you've been spending all this time like, who am I? I really want to matter in my professional life. I want to be seen out in the world, my reputation as someone that matters. And the wound that happens in this area is about feeling undervalued. It's about maybe having conflicts with authority or not knowing how to step into leadership, even though you really desire to, because having Aries in this part of your chart says, I'm a leader. I'm a warrior in my career space, in my professional life, in my reputation. But with Chiron going through here, it's really been pulling away the things that have stopped you from doing that. And whether that's your own internal obstacles that you've stopped yourself, or it's the behaviors you have in your professional area where you don't get seen or valued as somebody that can step up in a leadership role because they see you maybe as impetuous or impulsive. And so this is what we've been healing for quite a while now. And this area where you need to be holding a boundary really has to do with you because Cancer is where Mars has been doing that deep dive since September of emotional security. So I really feel like for Cancers, the boundaries are with yourself. I'm going to take a breath before I react to something. I'm going to change the way I approach something. Maybe I meditate, maybe I write a script before I go in and confront my boss. Maybe it's I'm going to give myself an inner pep talk before I step into the opportunity to lead something, to lead a team, to do a presentation. Something in your professional life needs you to set boundaries with you in order to be successful and really have the opportunity to fully be seen in this space as the leader, as the person of high value that you are, but maybe have not gotten full credit for. Okay, so we're going to look now at Libra. So for Libra, this eclipse is happening in your area of one-on-one relationships, partnerships. So that could be a spouse, it could be a business partner, it could be your clients. It's that one-on-one interaction. That's where this eclipse is happening. That's where Chiron has been working on your wounds for the last many years. And where Cancer has been working, where Mars is working in your Cancer area, is in your career. So this is really interesting because I feel like the whole journey of Libra has to do with balance in relationship. It's not just about this eclipse. It really is a life journey for Libras, balance in relationship. And I think part of that is so interesting because that means Libras have this Aries energy in the area of partnership. So it's like, what about me within partnerships? Libras are always having to figure out, where do I get into the equation when it comes to one-on-one relationships? Where am I being too independent? Where am I being codependent? What is that perfect interdependent balance with my one-on-one relationships? This is what's really been happening during this Chiron journey through this seventh house. So for Libras, let's just add a double dash of this because we just went through the Libra Aries axis of me versus we. And so you've been doing this for a couple years now on overdrive, right? Figuring out how you fit into the equation, letting go of codependent patterns. And I feel like this last eclipse of this series, of the Libra Aries series, is really like, did you get it? Did you, did we get it, Libra? Did we figure this out? Are you ready to really come into balance with, yes, I matter and I can have beautiful, loving, fulfilling one on one relationships and still put myself into the equation in a balanced way. And the way this shows up in your workspace, it always hits me. Where does the Libra use the workspace as an escape? Because that workspace is ruled by Cancer, and Cancer is that home and that safety and that security. So if you're out of balance in your relationship spaces, you may be spending more time in your workspace than in your relationship space because that feels safer. And this is where you're really going to be looking at, how do I balance that? How do I show up more fully? Especially if you've been leaning more towards, I'm really independent in my relationships. Like, in order for me to be in a relationship, I really have to be able to do my own life. And they're just like a peripheral person because I have ambition. We're going to be looking here at, how do we pull back some of that ambition so that we can have that harmonious relationship. You still get to be you. You still get to feel really good in your professional space because you've been doing this deep dive on what you need to make this professional space such an emotionally secure place, not just your Cancer crab shell, not just like, I use work as my armor, but and I feel seen and safe in this environment. So the flip side, I would say, is if you've been over the top codependent in your relationships and you don't see yourself at all. And so you've completely deferred your professional life because you're giving everything over to your partner. This may be an opportunity to explore that and say, you know what? I actually need something outside of this relationship to feel safe in who I am. And so you might have to take that line of, but I've got to get out into the world. I can't only be absorbed by this relationship. I've got to get out in the world because that actually brings emotional safety to me, as opposed to having your emotional well being be contingent on another person. So, this is where Libra has done so much work over the last 2 years. And I feel like it's this culmination point of like, let's do it. Okay, so and then finally, we're going to look at Capricorn and how this is really hitting the Capricorn sun and rising. So for Capricorn, this journey of Chiron through Aries has been going through your fourth house of home, family, roots, ancestry. And it's this opportunity to mend the issues about your family of origin, about your sense of belonging. You may find that if you look back into your childhood, having Aries be this part that rules your family of origin, Mars, this action, fiery energy ruling your home life, does that mean there was conflict in the home? Does that mean that you dimmed your light because of the outer fire, the outer energy of your childhood and your family? So you had to be, I can't show up. I can't be bright. I can't matter because that's not safe. It's really interesting to me, this dynamic, because there's a part of me that feels like having Aries here would have some people be that brat in their family, be the one that is like, no, but I matter and I'm going to throw the temper tantrum and you have to do for me because, it's all about me. But there's two sides of that coin. That temper tantrum is being thrown because you don't feel like you're being seen. There's a difference between standing in the I matter and that balanced, yes, there's value to me, and the kicking your feet to get people to see you. And so that's what Capricorn is really working on. And it's interesting because, as always, with the fourth house, this home and roots, that's the base of your chart, it's your foundation. So this is an energy that really speaks to how you were raised. What programs did you have? What environment were you raised in? And how did that environment, whether it was your family, your culture, your ancestral lineage, how did that shape how you felt about yourself? Like, I'm difficult. I'm not allowed to speak my truth. Anytime I did, I was shut down. This is something that the Capricorn is working on. Ever since 2019, this wound is really being opened and explored. And so you may have found yourself going into things like inner child work or ancestral healing as you've been on this journey to help you with this. And so, what I see this eclipse really doing, because it's in this foundational place, is you may now feel, I'm going to have to stand up to maybe a family member, maybe a family dynamic that you no longer want to carry forth. And this, in some ways, this is similar to what I was talking about with Aries. The difference here, though, is that what we really see is Cancer rules your seventh house. Mars has been doing a deep dive in relationships and partnerships. So, what Capricorn is really exploring here is, how do my programs and patterns around self-worth and self-acceptance impact my one-on-one relationships? Did I get into a relationship that just mimicked my dysfunctional family, that mimicked the pattern or belief that I learned in childhood that I don't matter? This is something that needs some action taken. So if you find yourself as a Capricorn in a relationship that is mimicking any sort of negative self-talk, negative belief system about you mattering, this is a conversation that needs to be had. Doesn't mean that you have to walk away from this relationship. Maybe there are going to be people who are like, this was the final straw. I finally realized that I'm in this relationship because I basically married my dad. And as much as I loved my dad, there were things about that that weren't healthy for me. And so, depending on what type of relationship with you have with your partner and whether or not they're also on this healing journey, will determine, can you heal this together or do you need to heal this separately? And so, that is what you're really looking at. It's also this idea of, because the healing is in this root, it's your home. Do I literally need to move to preserve my sense of self? Do I need to move away from my family to fully step in to who I am? Or, like I said, do I need to move away from this relationship because I'm realizing emotional security is not here? And then you think about those relationships that are lovely and emotional security is there. For whatever reason, you keep tying yourself to something in your childhood, something with how you were raised, with your foundation that isn't healthy and isn't allowing you to show up. And this is that opportunity for you to lean on your partner, lean on your close one on one relationships where you have found that emotional security so they can support you in stepping away and setting those boundaries, saying, you know what? I know you love your parents, but they treat you poorly. We need to hold this line. So that's where Capricorn is really finding this deep dive. So those are the four signs that are finding the biggest impact from this eclipse and from this Cancer Mars journey that we've been doing since September. And then all the other signs, yes, it's showing up for you somewhere in your chart. If you pull up your chart, you can see where is your Aries house and you go, okay, the eclipse is happening here. So I might notice it in these areas. Or, well, like we've talked about a lot, Mars has been transiting Cancer here. And so that's where I may see this interplay. But just also keep in mind, you could just be watching the show and it may not be so dramatic for you.
That is a lot, even for just the 4 signs, but I feel like it's really helpful and tactical and practical advice for us to really keep in mind as we really think about how these energies are going to affect us. So, just remind everyone one more time about the theme and wrapping everything up, and we'll close it up.
Okay, so theme: I matter, a dramatic push towards self expression. This spirit just said, it's go time.
It's go
It's
time.
go time.
I love it. I love it.
Loud, be proud because you matter.
Oh, let's end there. So beautiful. So, thank you, Catherine. Thank you all so much for listening. And if you know someone who would benefit from the wisdom within this podcast, please do us the honor of sharing it far and wide. And if you'd like to follow up with Catherine for personal readings, please find all of her information in the show notes. And we will see you all next time. Bye for now.